Hello, LinkedIn land and YouTube and anywhere you're watching Creative Lifescaping from. I am Dr. Caroline Brookfield, your host of Creative Lifescaping, a series where I interview people who might not seem that creative on the outside, but who have used creativity to make their lives better. So I am so thrilled today. This was a total bonus episode. I was supposed to be working as a veterinarian today, and I came back from a trip and I had a cold, and apparently I have to isolate for 10 days. So I connected with our next guest, and I was so thankful that she was able to join me today on the Creative Lifescaping. Lorraine Hamilton is an amazing human being. I've known Lorraine for many years. She's a globally accredited coach with over 15 years of experience. She's the coach that other coaches have sought out for over a decade to expand their skill base. She ran the ICF accredited coach school certified professional coach program for 5 years before being brought on as program director at Coaching Evolved by Emmy award-winning media entrepreneur and coach herself, Natalie McNeil, which, as a little aside, is where we met many years ago when I had a jewelry business and I was in the Conquer Club. So we were conquerors together. Lorraine now teaches the only ICF accredited multimodality coach certification of its kind with Natalie. She's the mentor that the French relationship expert Alexandre Coleman trusted to develop his skills, and has been featured in countless media outlets, including Coach Magazine, Coaching Life Magazine, New Zealand Business, Huffington Post, and many more. Before all of this, which is one of the reasons I asked Lorraine to join us, Lorraine was a radio frequency engineer. So I'm so excited. Please welcome Lorraine Hamilton.
Yay, it's so good to be here. I'm glad that we're doing this.
So I know. Cool. Sometimes like just the stars align and you're all over that bit of a woo stuff about, the universe and everything.
In a small adjacent. Woo adjacent.
Woo adjacent. I love that, woo adjacent. So Lorraine, as I mentioned, you started out your kind of professional career as a radio frequency engineer, something to do with cell phones. I had it in your bio and then I took it out because I was like, I didn't understand it. So maybe tell me a little bit about kind of what brought you to become a radio frequency engineer, which sounds like a fairly non-creative job, but tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, even before the radio frequency engineer, and just to simplify that, what that means is that I designed mobile phone networks. So I designed the base stations and the networks to make your phone work. And I know about how your phone works way more than is relevant for polite dinner conversation. It's
but maybe helpful when you're calling technical assistance. And you're like,
well, yeah. Sometimes it is. I find it really interesting that the older I get, the dumber people treat me, and so it's quite fun sometimes going in and talking to the youngsters and then sort of throwing out some of those terms, and I'm like, yeah, I know a little bit about that stuff. Anyway, before that though, I was a sound engineer.
Oh.
So I actually trained and got my degree in audio engineering and music technology and electronics and electrical engineering and all that stuff. And that was interesting and very aligned with what we're talking about today, because the reason that I went down that path was because I didn't think I was creative. And when I was like a teenager, all my friends were in bands and they were all like playing instruments and stuff. And I didn't have the patience to learn, to be honest. And I didn't have the balls to be a front man and, sing and stuff like that. And I was like, I really want to be involved. What can I do? And I was like, oh, I could be a sound engineer. I could be behind the desk and make them feel like sound even better. So that's how I got into engineering. And then that led to going into doing the cell phone design, because radio frequency and sound waves are very similar. So it actually came about from wanting to be involved in the arts, but not believing that I myself was creative. But the discipline of mixing music and mixing sound is incredibly creative, as is the design of mobile phone networks.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think that makes me think about a common misconception is that it sounds like your perception of creativity was something artistic versus something where you were creating, sound out of somebody else's sound, which, like you said, is still very creative. So did you think you were not creative from a very young age, or is there something that switched to say, I'm not creative at some point?
I think I've always believed that I wasn't creative, because exactly what you said, the artistic thing was like, I can't draw, therefore I'm not creative.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I was a great writer all through my very early years in primary school, I was always writing things, and my stories were always plastered over the teachers' walls in the classroom. And my mum will still talk about that, but I never saw that as creative.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that I hadn't joined those dots. And then in terms of performing arts, I always want to do my best. That's just inherently who I am. I want to do the best that I can do. And so I was in this like primary school performance, and so I did my best, but it singled me out for scrutiny and criticism and judgment and bullying, and so that shut that whole thing down from a very early age. So yeah, definitely didn't consider myself creative, but now joining the dots from this perspective, yeah, probably was.
Yeah, I think your story is so common. And I have a similar story I wrote about in my book, where I was probably grade 1 or 2, and it was a talent show. And I could play the piano, like I had been taking piano lessons, but I decided I wanted to try ventriloquism. So that was my moment of sitting up. I had no idea how to do, like, it's not something you pick up as a grade 1 with the 2 minutes practice you do. And I remember sitting at the front of the class and just seeing the shocked looks of horror on the faces of the people that were watching. And I remember that for me was a moment like your performing arts moment, where I was just like, this is wrong, and you're wrong to share yourself and to try something new. And I think that's often what we see. And we know from the studies Dr. George Land did that 98% of kindergartners are genius creative. And by the time they get to like, I think it's 15 years old, they're like 10% of them are genius creative. So I think judgment, which we're one of the themes that we're going to talk about today, is one of the things that holds so many people back from their creativity.
Yeah.
So fast forward, you're an engineer, you think you're not creative. Then tell me what happened.
Yeah, well, so I was in engineering. This is something that's really dear to me and my work that I do now. I was a female engineer. There weren't very many of us around. There still aren't enough of us around. And I had a couple of roles that I think that I thought were fine. Now, again, benefit of hindsight, there are some questionable things that happened there. But the real crunch happened for me in one of my roles where I was the only female engineer. My manager was an engineer. He wasn't a people manager. He'd been put in the role because of his technical ability. Really nice man. Had no idea what to do with a female engineer. And so it was incredibly damaging, probably for both of us. But it was very damaging for me, because here I was, having come through my career to that point, my school career, and then into my professional career to that point, believing that I knew what the rules were, and that if I performed and I worked hard and I did what I was supposed to do, then I would get praise, I would get approval, I would be seen, and I would succeed. But that didn't happen, because I wasn't behaving in the way that he was used to, and I wasn't one of the guys. And so the harder I worked, the less praise I was getting. And as women, so I'm very interested in women's socialization, and particularly women in male-dominated environments. So the thing that I had been fed for years and years and years was, be a good girl, play by the rules, this is how you succeed, and the reward is praise and approval. Here I was effectively starving all day, every day in my job. And it was incredibly debilitating for me, and it really had a massive impact on my mental health. And it was and it was really hard for him as well, because he wanted the best but didn't know how to do it. He wasn't in an environment where he had been supported to be the best leader that he could be. So no blame there. It was just an awful situation. So that's what led me down the path of, right, okay, well, clearly there's something in this communication leadership piece, this understanding that because I was walking through the world going, this is the way the world works, and suddenly it's broken, and not really realizing that we all have our own model of the world. Mm-hmm. So that's when I started to learn about that and look at, and through my own recovery from that situation, and really starting to tap into, this is really interesting how we're all wandering around with our unique recipe of rules and values and beliefs in the world, and how that impacts our behavior and our success. So that's what took me down the path of taking that into coaching. Mm. And I've never lost that passion since. So it's that was the switch. But one of the great things in part of the story, and I don't know if you're going to ask me this or not, but I'm going to just share anyway, was in partway through that journey and that switch, and I had moved into coaching, we moved across the world. So we moved from Scotland to New Zealand, and I landed in New Zealand, and suddenly it was like, maybe it would be a good idea to get a job. And so I started looking around for a job just to get, to build a network and a community. And I've always had more than one job offer. It's like whenever I get a job, it's like I have multiple offers. And I had 2 offers, one of which was very aligned with the coaching work and working in mental health. And the other one was back in engineering. And I was really, really nervous about which one to take. And the money one out, engineering is very well paid. And so I was like, okay, I'll do this. And I was really nervous about it, like super nervous about going back into that environment. But the difference was I had the benefit of all this coaching knowledge, the research that I had done, the training that I had done. And it was a completely different experience, because by bringing that coaching in and treating everybody else as unique and special, and and knowing how to motivate them from a values perspective, it ended up that my engineering team were leading culture in the whole organization. Wow. And we ended up, we won an IBM Connexa award for employee engagement. And it was just a beautiful moment to be able to come full circle and close that off in a really positive way. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that. Like, you saw a problem, you developed the skills to be the solution, and you had the courage to step in and try those and realize that, it does work, right? So it's like that full circle of learning and applying it, and, self-fulfilling, like probably gave you even more passion for the work of coaching that you do.
Oh yeah, 100%. And then I loved them both for a long time, until it just got too big, and then it was a case of having to step out of the job and into the passion full time, which was about 7 years ago now. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and I can vouch for Lorraine's coaching expertise, because I've worked with Lorraine as my coach, and she's just so lovely and patient, and very willing to work with someone with ADHD. So not everybody. So I remember when we did Lorraine, you did a program in Vancouver just before COVID, like COVID was just breaking out. And I joined you with many of your other coaching students. And I remember doing a practice. I was the coaching client, and one of the students was practicing on me. And at the end of the conversation, that student said, "Oh, is there anything else you need?" And I'm like, "Yeah, could you send me a summary of what you think we talked about?" And her face was like, and she was like, "You, like, am I supposed to do that?" And you were like, "Well, for Caroline, yes." Which was nice. So that is actually, before I continue on that segue into creativity and coaching, I just wanted to welcome anybody who's just hopped on with us. I'm Caroline Brookfield, and I'm speaking to Lorraine Hamilton, coach extraordinaire, leading the Purple Hair Revolution. And we're talking about, the inner critic and embracing creativity and stepping into that arena and being more of ourselves in the world. And the segue we were talking about was that idea of you being so flexible with my needs, with my ADHD and my inability sometimes to organize ideas and strategies, which is why I hired a coach, is because I struggle with those steps of execution. So I would love to know, I mean, I'm sure you come up with different types of situations with all different types of clients. So how do you use creativity to help a client or to overcome an obstacle when you're working with one of your coaching clients?
Oh, that is a really beautiful question. And it drives my students mad because they they want they'll watch me do a coaching demo, and then they'll ask me, they're like, so how do you know when to use that? And it's a really difficult question for me to answer because the creative part of coaching is so led by intuition. And it's something that I had to learn, and something that my student coaches really struggle with as well. Again, coming to that, back to that piece of, we want to do it right. You know, it's like, well, I'm really passionate about this, so I want to make sure that I'm doing it right. Where's the blueprint? I'll follow the blueprint. Whereas actually the most powerful coaching comes when you release the blueprint and you just have the deep trust and the ability to drop into your gut and listen, and listen for those whispers of, this is what this client needs in the moment. And it takes a bit of practice and it takes a bit of experience, but that can lead me to designing bespoke exercises and questions in the moment that take my clients out of their head and into a much more expansive, creative place themselves.
Yeah, what I hear when you say that is, and I correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing you say there's some type of pause, or almost like you have to give yourself space for that intuition. I don't know if I interpreted that wrong, but it feels like you were saying you need to kind of sit and like be with that intuition. Is that right? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll be listening to a client, and then and my intuition is going crazy, and it's like, this is the thing, we need to do it now, to do the thing. And I'm trying to quieten that voice a little bit to let my client get their story out.
Yeah.
And other times they'll share with me their story, and they'll be waiting for my response, and it will take me a minute just to go, and it might be, tell me a bit more, because I haven't had the hit yet, but the hit will come. And even, expanding that out into other creative pursuits in my business, it is that space for daydreaming. It's creating that space in my day where I don't have to be doing anything. That's where I can be at my most creative. And so some people say, oh, we need to meditate. I'm not so much of a meditator, but I'm very much a daydreamer. I'm very much quite happy just sitting and allowing my thoughts to, I'm almost like a passive observer, and just letting them do their thing. And then it distills down into, okay, that's the thread that I'm going to pull today, and that's what I'm going to work with.
Well, I mean, that is scientifically proven that daydreaming, there's specific ways, but you're exactly right. Daydreaming engages your default mode network, which is the part of your brain that is working hard. But the trick is that you don't feel like you're doing anything. People think it's frivolous or wasteful, but your brain is working extremely hard to connect all these different dots. And if you don't give your brain that time for daydreaming, like you're saying, you're not going to come up with these amazing insights that are basically a collection unconsciously of all of the experiences and knowledge you have in the world to come up. It's not like it comes out of the blue. Like, I don't have the coaching experience background that you do. So if I daydreamed on a problem for somebody that is looking for help, I would not come to the same conclusions, because the layers of experience and knowledge that we have is what helps us come up with those ideas. It's not coming out of the blue. And I think maybe that's what you're talking about when your students have an issue, or they're challenged with letting go of that, because there is a switch. Like, there's a moment we're in experience and learning and finding out all of the blueprints. And there's a point at which we have to step off into our, the uncertainty of how do we apply that in a creative way. And I think what I'm hearing is that you're saying that you're connecting those two things, but you can't just go on, like I couldn't just go on intuition to coach somebody, because I still do need that experience and that blueprint and that knowledge to back me up. Does that make sense?
It does. And there isn't a perfect moment, but from the start, I'm encouraging my students to learn how to trust themselves. And that's what the Purple Hair Revolution is about. It's about taking people in and understanding those layers that are keeping them in their head, and taking them out of their head and into their body more, so that they can really access those places in their sort of heart and gut space where that intuition, that courage, that certainty lives, because it doesn't live up here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you work mainly with women in male-dominated careers, and I would guess more like STEM type careers. And how do you, like, that must be a tough nut to crack, really. How do you, like, can you walk us through like what it might look like for someone who's in a more traditionally analytic career, who's not used to connecting with their creativity and intuition? Like, how do you kind of get them to start feeling into that a bit more?
Yeah, it's a really interesting space to be in, because one of the big challenges that I come up against is that many women in those arenas don't feel safe around other women.
Oh.
So there's they feel safer in that male-dominated environment. It's not exclusive.
Sorry, can I clarify? You mean other women in their career, or just other women outside of that male-dominated area, or both?
It can be both.
Okay.
And depending on their experiences. So some women have followed that career because of experiences with women or other girls in early childhood. Others have developed it over the later part of their life. So that's an interesting piece, is bringing together the right women who appreciate that. And I'll ask, when I'm in groups, and I'll ask the question, is like, have you ever had that experience of feeling unsafe in groups of women? And the numbers of hands that go up, really, it hurts my heart. Mm-hmm. But it definitely seems to be a challenge. So that's the first thing. It's sort of like reaching people and saying, it's okay, this is a very safe space for you, even if you have had challenging experiences in the company of women before. Mm-hmm. So that's been a really interesting part of this work. And then the other piece is the analytical, the intellectual, that is what has been rewarded and praised, particularly if my clients don't have an identity or can't connect with their own external appearance. And that's also very common. So they've chosen the smart intellect identity rather than what we've been brought up as, you must be beautiful, you must be likable, you must be popular, you must be. So we get smart, funny, pretty. So
like those are our choices, you're saying?
Pretty much. Yeah. Which identity do you want to choose?
Yeah.
So when I'm working with people who have subconsciously chosen smart, for me to try and take them out of their head so that they can start to access some of that other wisdom and actually give themselves a bit of a break, because your brain's not designed to do all of that work on its own. That can feel very challenging and very scary. It's like, no, but hang on a minute. If I let control go of this part of me, what's going to happen? Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting, very interesting process. But when we do, when we have built that trust and that community and we can start to access, it's so powerful, and it can happen so very, very quickly, to releasing things like inner critic and tapping into that deep wisdom and intuition and having experiences of feeling, hearing, seeing those messages.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely relate to that as a veterinarian. And for anybody watching, again, I'm Caroline Brookfield. I'm interviewing Lorraine Hamilton. We're talking about the purple hair revolution and tapping into our intuition and trying to find a better relationship with our inner critic and how that relates to creativity. So, Lorraine, I've got your website up here. So for people who are interested in your program, and I'll just pop up if you're looking for Lorraine, you can connect with her on LinkedIn, and please pop any questions or comments you have into the chat. Sometimes I can't see them all depending on how all this tech stuff works. But happy to answer any questions or, bring in any chats that people might want to share. So we talked a lot about earlier our experiences having that criticism for our creativity. And that is probably where inner critic started, right? And I call it an outdated operating system. People say like smash your inner critic and just like crush them. And I don't subscribe to that, because I think our inner critic is there for a reason. It was there to keep us in a community so we didn't get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or die of starvation. So I call mine Todd, and I'm like, oh, Todd, go sit in the corner and have a lollipop. If I look like I'm going to die, you can, engage. So I guess as our inner critic develops and strengthens, it really limits our voices and how we show up in the world. And I really feel that creativity is like a easy book. Like, it doesn't matter if you draw a painting and nobody likes it, but it's that practice and that exercise of stepping into sharing a little piece of yourself and realizing that nobody really cares that much about what you do anyway. So I'd love to hear your perspective about how you work with people, what you think about that, my thoughts, and about how creativity, how creativity might intersect with this idea of working with your clients to have an inner, like, I don't know how you would describe it, to get over your inner critic. I call it having a better relationship with your inner critic, but I'd love to hear what you think about it.
Well, first of all, I love that that's where you're landing with this, because again, I don't subscribe to this, conquer your inner critic or any of that kind of language, because I completely agree. Our inner critic is there for a reason, and it does a very good job. In fact, when your inner critic is getting in your way, it's not that it's trying to stop you from doing anything fun. It's actually just so good at its job. It's been so honed that it's just keeping you very, very safe, because the safest place for us is right here, right now. And anytime you try and do something outside of that, your inner critic is going to have something to say about it. So I love the idea of developing the relationship with your inner critic. And that's what I do with my clients, is getting them to recognize it, and also to understand that the inner critic voice can be changed, altered, that it doesn't need to be the one that is shouting the loudest. And noticing what other characters have you got going on there, what other voices, if that's how, because we have different ways of experiencing inner critic, right? So some people hear a voice, they literally hear the words in their head. Other people just get that sense of this isn't right. And some people will have some sort of imagery. But there's different ways of experiencing your inner critic. But many of us hear that voice of, who do you think you are to be doing this? Why should we be listening to you? You're not good enough. So that's a really common way of accessing, oh yeah, that could be the inner critic at play here. And really understanding what does it want for us, and what are we trying to do that is triggering it. And it's usually when we're trying to progress or grow or do something interesting. So trying to ignore it is not something that is going to help long term, in my opinion. Yes, you can stuff it down, or you can try and ignore it, and it will. In the experience that I've had with my clients, which is more than 10,000 hours of experience over the years, that only works for a period of time. And then the resulting impact can be quite dramatic, and it's almost like hitting a wall. So it's a much better practice to start recognizing those voices earlier, and recognizing if they were someone who really, really cared for me, what is it that they are trying to tell me? So thinking about your most conservative family member who adores you and is just trying to keep you exactly as you are, this perfect little thing. That's your inner critic, really. That's how I like to think about it. I love that yours is called Todd, but I have like a whole, cast of characters depending on what I'm trying to do. There could be, there could be the inner critic. There could be anger. There could be something that's making me angry, which is my sense of justice. It's like something feels unfair. So what feels unfair here? It could be a sense of sadness. I always get I don't know if your viewers have seen the Pixar movie Inside Out.
Yeah.
So this is a really cool comparison. I just did a talk for my daughter's senior leadership team in her school. She's in her final year of high school. And I brought these characters in because we were talking about inner critic and we were talking about fixed and growth mindset and identifying that we have more than just the inner critic voice. There's lots of them. So realizing that they all have a part to play, but rooting ourselves in the assumption that they all want the best for us. I went off track.
No, it's good. No, I love that. And it's really, I think what you're saying a lot is about self-awareness is the number one thing. Like you can't manage something if you can't see it. So when you see that transformation in people, when you see someone who is like, paralyzed by an inner critic or one of the other voices, what are some of the things, if there is a common thread, that seem to kind of push people into that area of being able to, because they're not going to go from saying nothing to like speaking out all the time. So, for me, I feel like it's a practice. So that first step, how do you see, or if there's a common thread about how people start to make that first step to, first of all, recognize it, which seems to me a bit more internal. And then how do they go from that to then saying, I'm going to speak out in a meeting or share my thoughts or something like that? Is there something that happens?
So there's lots of different ways that I manage it depending on the client. But in my experience, many of my clients it's a normal response if I say, and who's got an inner critic, and that's like, oh yeah, it's quite common that people can say, yeah, I can access my inner critic. I know that that's happening. Yeah, I've got that voice that tells me that I'm not good enough. And going from there, what I like to do as the next step is demonstrate that we have more control over that voice than we think we do. And that's why there are lots of different ways that we can do that. To give you an example of one, I'll ask, where do you hear that voice? Is it internal or external? So are they hearing it from inside their head, or does it feel like it's coming from outside? Is it a masculine or feminine voice? So I really ask a lot of questions about the quality of the voice, and then I change them. So by changing the qualities of the voice, it changes the feeling that we have attached to the voice. So, for example,
trigger, like it doesn't become as much of a trigger because it's different. Is that fair? Or?
That's right. Yeah. So we have got a very strong link to the way that we experience the world, the way that we make meaning of the world, and how it makes us feel. So if that inner critic voice is really loud and booming and it's inside, then I might invite you to imagine it coming from over in the room somewhere else. It's coming from somewhere else. And that what happens if you turn the volume down a little bit, or if you change from a masculine to a feminine voice. And just by being able to imagine making those changes to the quality of the voice, what you're learning is that you have a lot more power and control over this than you thought you did. And you'll experience a shift in the intensity of the feelings that are attached to that voice.
That's amazing. And, I just had an epiphany. You just coached me on this. I love that. And I think we did that exercise before. But my epiphany, Lorraine, is as you're talking about that, I realized like I don't usually have as much of a problem with my inner critic. I mean, I do stand-up comedy and I'm a little bit out there. But I think what I realized, and it was when you were talking about the number of characters in Inside Out, I have my character, I have Todd, but then I also have a very loud voice that's just like, oh, Todd, like I have the opposite of an inner critic. It's almost like I have two separate voices. So I feel like it's not like me saying Todd, it's like another voice. It's like, just do it. It's like the devil and the angel on the shoulder kind of thing. So I love this sense of like changing the narrative around what you're saying to yourself to try to interrupt that pattern of actions that you are going through, it sounds like. So, and
Yeah.
what is the result? So let's say someone goes through this exercise and they change masculine to a feminine voice, for instance, or vice versa, or outside to inside. And then what happens? Do they just then the next time they're in a meeting and they remember to, because my problem is I'd always forget to do that. And it'll be after the meeting. I'm like, oh shoot, I should have done the exercise Lorraine told me to do. Right. So how do they implement that?
So I often in the moment having that epiphany of, hey, I've got more control over this than I thought I did, can be really dramatic. But it is a practice. It is a case of when you're in that next situation, when you're in that meeting, and remembering it. And sometimes you will, and sometimes you won't. And being okay with the times that you don't, because at the moment you're really, really good at the way that you do things.
Yeah.
You've practiced it. You're an expert. You don't need to think about it. This is like going back to learning how to drive.
Yes.
So you've had a little bit of experience. You've probably got in and you've sat in the seat and you've put your seatbelt on and you've sort of got your hands on the wheel. But you really haven't switched the car on yet. So giving yourself some grace to practice and build a new way. It's like unlearning any habit or skill and then learning a new one. So I
I'm
think
so excited to share an analogy with you, if you'll indulge me. I just got back from England, like because I was visiting family, and that's why I'm kind of, I've got a cold. I've negative for COVID, thank goodness. But I drove, so it's left hand. I'm in Canada. We drive on the right side of the road, and in England, it's the left side of the road. And I was doing great. I'd rented a car. My cousin lived in this tiny village, and I was at the end, like literally at the bottom of the road. And I turned in, and it was a car blocking the lane, and I had to go into the other lane. And I must have been tired, not paying attention. I basically drove right into the back of her bumper because I was used to driving on the right-hand side, and my instinctive kind of assessment of where the edge of the car was, I needed to relearn. And so I guess the answer to that, what you're saying is, if you're using that metaphor, is that I just need to get back in the car and just slow down, or, drive more carefully, or I don't know. But that's what made me think of that, because I'm a good driver. Like I've been driving for however many years, but not on the left side of the road, which to me is kind of an analogy for like what you're saying, to reprogram that inner critic voice. Would that be fair? Am I totally out of there?
No, it's absolutely the case. And it's a great, all my analogies are pretty much car analogies. I don't
Yeah, yes, that's right. You're a car aficionado.
Yeah, it's all cars. But we have strategies for everything that we do, and we practice them and practice them and practice them till we don't need to think about them anymore, which is great, because then it takes it out of our brain and we can use that for something else. So another thing to think about is, we've got a strategy for everything. We've got a strategy for the way that we get out of bed in the morning, getting dressed, something for your viewers and listeners. Have you ever tried to shower differently? Like, we have a strategy for how we shower, and there's a process, and we don't have to think about it. And if you try and start with the other arm, or start with your feet when you usually start with your head, or it's weird. And this is the same principle.
Well, it's neuroplasticity, right? We used to think the brain didn't change. I recently read Daniel Eagleman's book, Live Wired, and just about how our brain is a battleground. If we don't use part of our brain, or we have it's embedded, or it'll take over a different area. So we have to continue to try, like you said, to do new things. And that's one of the big drivers as well, ironically, of creativity, is having new experiences and doing something new, so that you don't get stuck in that rut of behavior. So it's really all we're talking about is trying to get out of that habitual behavior and those things that have kind of supposedly worked for us in the past evolutionarily, but might not work for the environment we're in today. So just trying to get ourselves to be more aware of what we're doing and then try to reprogram that a little bit at a time. Sounds like what you're saying. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that we're talking about the evolutionary perspective as well, because we still have that programming running. And what we've found now from the research into the vagus nerve is that a lot more of our information is traveling from body to brain than from brain to body, which is what we used to think. And so understanding how to get into that gut and heart space is really important, because your mobility, your mobilization, your action taking actually comes from your body. It doesn't come from your head. So you can't think your way out of inaction. So if you find that you're procrastinating or you're not taking action, and I just did a session on self-sabotage yesterday, then it comes, we can't think our way out of that. Right. Because it's actually happening at such a deeply subconscious level. So yeah, that's another piece of research that is really, really interesting.
Yeah, I really got that experience firsthand when I went to San Diego and worked with Dr. Doug Brockman. I think I told you about this, the shooting meditation where we meditated and then shot sniper rifles. And he talks about this Buddhist idea of the monkeys and the elephant. Are you familiar with this idea? Have you heard about this?
I think so, but it might refresh my memory. There are a few elephants that I have in my...
There's elephants everywhere. How do you eat an elephant? So it's basically what you're saying. I mean, the idea is that there's monkeys and an elephant. So if you imagine like a group of like 6 monkeys sitting on top of an elephant, and the monkeys have sharp sticks, and the monkey is the monkey brain, the monkey mind that you're talking about. And we think the monkeys think they're in charge, because if they poke the elephant, she'll move. And eventually the elephant is like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to cross that river. And the monkeys beat it with sticks harder and harder. And she says, I still don't want to cross the river. And then the monkeys give up. But what they do is they then say, oh, well, we didn't want to go across the river anyway. Or, oh, yeah, I guess we'll just do it tomorrow. And so this idea that the elephant's the one in charge, and the elephant's the one that wants to stay exactly where you're used to being, because that comfortable has helped us stay alive. And what we've done for thousands of years has helped us survive, but it's not working now. And so the trick is to combine that, like, and I could be totally getting this wrong, but is to try to connect, like you're saying, connect the monkeys and the elephant, and try to stop the monkeys thinking that they're the only ones got anything going on. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, 100%. I have heard that. Yeah. And it's true. So really, recognizing that and learning how because we have those voices as well in the heart space and the gut space, but they're way quieter than the ones in our head. So for them to be heard, we need to know and to give ourselves the space to feel into those spaces and understand what it's like, and how to get them all working together. And I will often facilitate conversations between head, heart, and gut in my clients, and they're like, "Whoa, this is that woo adjacent thing." It's like, what? But when they have the experience, it's utterly life changing.
Yeah. And we're running a little bit out of time. I always go over. I hope that's okay, because it's my show. I do what I want. I'm not going to forget you chose the dare. Lorraine has an amazing book, and it's amazing because I am in it.
You are.
But I love this Dye Your Hair Purple Sooner. Lorraine talks a lot about, well, tell us a little bit more about the book. Why don't, in your words?
Yeah, the book is really about playing bigger in your life, career, or business. And I call that stepping into your Technicolor life. So, people are attracted to me because of my hair, and I decided just to go all in on the branding. And I was on a podcast a couple of years ago, and we'd been talking about being brave and taking courageous steps. And I used to dye my hair as a teenager, but it was really to keep people away, because I was terrified of the world. I was like, don't speak to me. And it was kind of like, from the animal world, it's like if I made myself look this way, then it would keep people away. But now I do it because I feel like it's an external representation of how I feel inside. It does feel more like me when I've got my purple hair. And so we've been talking about that in this podcast, and the podcast host had said, so, if you could give yourself, some advice, if you could go back and give your former self some advice, what would you say? And I said, dye your hair purple sooner. Like, step into that version of you sooner, step into that authentic version of you. Don't be so afraid of everything. And she said, that's the title of your next book. And I was like, okay. And so we had the title, and then I had to write the book. But the book is really about, it's almost like having me in your pocket as your coach, and walking you through some of the tools and processes that I use with my clients to help them step into their Technicolor life. And it's peppered with amazing stories from clients and friends of mine sharing their moment of when they leant into that discomfort so that they could move through the other side. So,
well, you definitely helped me do that. I mean, working together with you, I love the way you tie in this values, but you come from a place that I feel is understandable to me. Like, it's woo adjacent, not, I don't know what the other word was, like full woo. It's woo adjacent, which is a perfect way to describe it. And if you're looking to hear more from Lorraine, you can check out her book. But I highly encourage you. She's doing a new program soon. So do you want to give us a little brief on your program, because it's opening soon, right? It won't be long.
Yeah, so we're open now, and we are open until the 18th of April. Class starts on the 20th of April. It's a 12-week group coaching program for women, and it is a very safe space for women to explore some of those deeper pieces that they haven't had the space to do before. So we will talk about values. We do talk about inner critic. We also talk about inner mentor and unhooking from praise and criticism, and being able to move through the world without being hung up on either. Communication and negotiation, and also having those experiences of really tapping into the head, heart, gut, and the science behind that as well, that it's not just something that I've plucked out the air that seems to work. We've got yay science, because I can't do anything unless it's got substance. Yeah. So it's a beautiful container, an experience of learning and coaching and journaling. So it's a personal experience for you. Not very. There's not a lot of work to be done in between sessions. So really just turn up, have that space for you in the live calls with me. And there's some coaching opportunities as well. I'm super excited about it. The group that are coming together are beautiful. And I'd love you to check it out.
I love it. And can people find information on the website? I've just put it back up here on the screen here.
Yes, so if you go to the website, lorrainehamilton.net, there is a link at the top, navigation for Purple Hair Revolution, and there is lots of information on that page. And of course, if you have more questions, then do reach out at lorrainehamilton.net. I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, like I said, I can vouch for the amazingness of working with you and with people who maybe don't think that they have done coaching before. I can promise that Lorraine is so creative with how she takes your hand and takes you through the process. So, but before we go, we are going to do a dare. And I didn't have an idea of my dare until we were talking. And I am going to ask you to do a really, really bad magic trick.
Oh my God.
I'm not going to make you think.
No idea even where to start.
Well, you can daydream for a minute. I'll let you daydream for a minute while I just mention thank you all for watching this. And I do tons of these interviews with people just like Lorraine, who have so much knowledge to share and about how they've, kind of found a way to manage that inner critic and found a way to step into their Technicolor life with creativity. So I'm so thankful to Lorraine. So is that enough time, or do you need some more time?
No, we'll go with it. Right. Okay. I can't believe we're doing this. Right.
What's your inner critic saying right now?
My inner critic has got a lot to say right now. It's going, what are you doing? Get off this call. This is insane. You're not.
Why did you agree to an interview with Caroline?
Exactly. You know, you never liked her anyway, which is a total lie. Total lie. And I adore you. Right. Okay. So you are going to be my beautiful helper, and we're going to do some magic with my little friend here. So I need you to send this little friend. So since we're talking about personal growth, I want you to send some love and growth energy to our little friend. So close your eyes and send as much as you can. 1, 2, 3. Look what you did.
Oh, wow. That's my magic trick. You got to do your own magic trick.
Oh, is it?
I'm the one that made the magic happen.
You did. You made all the magic happen. Well done. So she's grown exponentially with all of your vibes.
Oh, with all my love and attention and fancy movements. Yeah. Well, Lorraine, it has been, as usual, a pleasure to see you. And I'm so glad we have a chance. This is a great way to connect with people as well when we're so busy. And it's just like, it's nice that other people get to watch. And I'm just so thrilled that we have this conversation together. And thank you so much. I'm so looking forward to hearing about how it's going with your Purple Hair Revolution course, and learn more about your next book, maybe. And just thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with us today, and your woo adjacent point of view.
Thanks for having me, Caroline. And yeah, it's been great to catch up. I've loved it.
Thank you. And if you want to connect with Lorraine on LinkedIn, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, she's tagged as a speaker, go to her website, or you can send me a message or send me a carrier pigeon and we'll get you in touch. But definitely connect with Lorraine. She is an amazing human being. And if you do the Purple Hair Revolution, you don't even have to dye your hair purple.
No.
I hope. Do you?
No, you don't. You don't. Well, there's another metaphor. So maybe they're not all cars.
Yes, maybe. Purple car. Is there a purple car?
I did think about having my car wrapped, but I haven't done it yet.
You could put those things on bicycles that have like the streamers coming out the ends.
Oh my goodness.
You could put that on the end, like the little purple streamers.
I should totally do that. I've got a track day coming up. We'll go whiz around the track and with my purple streamers.
Yeah. Send me a picture. Okay. Thanks,
Caroline.
Lorraine. I appreciate you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.